Today's webinar is called Evaluating Social Sustainability on the Farm. My name is Deb Haliba, and I work at the University of Vermont Extension as Vermont SARE Coordinator. Today's webinar is provided as part of Vermont's State SARE Professional Development Program with funding from the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. And I would like to thank Dr. Diane Parent for her time today, as well as Brenda Chem, who will be providing translation as needed. It's my privilege now to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Diane Parent. Is a professor in the Department of Animal Sciences at Université Laval. She is a founding member of Laval, which is a multidisciplinary research group with the mission of contributing to knowledge development, dissemination, and training in the areas of farm management, farm transfer, and establishment in agriculture. Dr. Parent's research interests focus on the challenges of sustainable agriculture development, specifically examining social aspects. And among many of her credentials, in 2010, she was invited by the National Institute of Public Health of Quebec to become a member of a scientific committee to focus on the relationship between agriculture and the quality of life of rural communities. Diane, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Deborah. And I am so pleased to be here with you in line. And as you will hear, English is not my first language, so I beg your pardon in advance. So I will present you our research project that we are going through at Laval University. You know, as you heard, based in the French part of Canada and Quebec. And so we will start now. And well, the title announces the content of the conference. It's about the method and how our team build a method for the evaluation of farm sustainability in Quebec, Canada. And I will insist on the main aspect, I think, innovative aspect, and not only in the scientific literature, but in the field too. How can we evaluate the social sustainability? Not only on the agriculture, but the social sustainability of the farm. So, yeah. A quick reminder, you know, I know that everybody knows about the definition of sustainable agriculture. I think the most spread example given by FAO, which is, a system that preserves land and water resources, genetic resources and animals, and that is both economically viable and, it's very important, but sometimes we forget that, socially acceptable. But, you know, we have a lot of definition about sustainability, agricultural sustainability, but not too very much about sustainability of the farm. I would like to introduce you with some aspects of the context in Quebec, Eastern Canada, because I think we have a lot in common with the Vermont situation. You know, in Quebec, several factors lead us to take a better look at the sustainability. We have intensification of production and geographic concentration of certain crops and livestock, and have resulted in an increased pressure on water, air, and soil resources. Also, certain economic conditions. We have a quota system, you know, in Quebec, and certain economic conditions and ongoing uncertainty about the future of milk quotas undermine the economic situation. And now we realize we have an important, we have the decline of the number of the farms in Quebec. It's also a major concern. For example, You know, in Quebec now we have one farmer of 30 years old and less for 3 farmers of 55 years old and more. 1 for 3. It's a great problem of renewal generation. 15 years ago we have 1 for 1. It's not a matter of one generation. In only 15 years we miss some young farmers. So that's an important issue also. And of course, societal expectations are increasingly high towards the modes of production and towards the quality of rural area in general. Therefore, the concept of sustainability has also become a challenge for social sciences. And many actors advocate greener farms, but as I always said, will there even be enough farmers to manage those green farms? And will the farmers continue to like their work? So it's a very important issue. And that's why not only for the project, for the basement of for the project, but the basement of the evaluation, we have to set what is a sustainable farm. And I published a paper. I began to reflect that in 2000, 2001, and that is the result. So. The concept of sustainable agriculture boasts fairly extensive literature, but few sustainability assessment tools or methods include all 3 aspects of SD, sustainable development. For the majority of people and organizations, sustainable development was first and foremost an environmental concept, and only this aspect deserves assessment, says Aini in 2006. Even though it has been several years since sustainable development was described, our definition implies that the farm must be viable, livable, transmissible, and of course ecologically reproducible. And reproducible, for example, which means the use of natural resources and the capacity to regenerate them. Transmissible, which means if there is a farm successor or succession interested in the farm, succession, family or not. We have some very interesting example of young farmers who are not family linked with the old people, you know, the people who want transmit the farm. And the third characteristic is livable, which refers to quality of life. We will have some definition, some concrete indicator about all of these aspects later. And finally, of course, the farm used to be viable, which refers to the capacity to generate profit on the farm. That is our main basement definition, and we start with this and try to build a method. But before that, I have to insist on some aspect, like what is a good indicator? It's not a theoretical aspect. It's very concrete. Because some indicator, how do we choose one and another for example, some indicators seems to be very interesting, but when you go to the farm, you have not the information. It's sometimes too vague, and well, we have to set the quality of a good indicator. First, an indicator is a variable which supplies information on other variables. And variables that are difficult to acquire can be used as a benchmark to take decisions. And there are 6 conditions to characterize a good indicator. Because an indicator has to set two goals. It has to take a good diagnosis, and it has to be a good tool for future decisions. And a good indicator has to be first easy to implement. I have to follow my paper because I will lose my way. First, yeah. A good indicator has to be easy to implement. For example, I will give you some concrete question that we have to raise for the evaluation of the indicator. For example, is the data easily available on the farm? Is the data for this indicator already being measured for another purpose? That's why we tend to evaluate easy to implement. An indicator has to be comprehensible immediately. Do this indicator need a level of technical expertise to be comprehensible? Do the farmer and the advisor is it familiar to him? Which means something to the farmer. The indicator has to be comprehensible immediately. And also, a good indicator has to be reproducible, the reliability of indicator. For example, will this indicator be calculated the same way on each farm, year after year? That is very important. And the fourth one is sensitive to variation. Will this indicator be able to follow the evolution on the farm? Will the result increase or decrease depending on the management practices adopted by the farmer? That's what means sensitive to variation. And an indicator has to be adapted to the objective. For example, does this indicator answer the objectives, self-diagnosis and decision aid tools? Is this indicator linked with for example, environmental sustainability objectives overall? So it has to be adapted to the objective and finally relevant for the user. That's why the 6 characteristics of a good indicator. And well, I don't want to explain in detail all existing methods, but you know, in the literature, in the field, there are some other methods. For example, in Vermont, I think Andrew Matthews built a dairy stewardship islands in Vermont. And we have one of the most inspiring for us was the IDA method in France. And well, Wageningen University, for example, in the Netherlands, I know this place very much, but there are some methods that are very interesting in environmentally, technical economic matter, but in social there are always some missing aspects. And I have to tell you a very important point. A method is also you know, it's a very social, cultural spirit in the method. Some aspects are important, for example, in Quebec. I take an example, transmission of the farm is very, very, very important. And when my PhD student, Valérie Bélanger, which is on the board, when Valérie was in Australia, the aspect of transmission was not so quite important as us. We have to adapt. In Quebec, for example, cohabitation with the neighborhoods is now very important. We have some rural area with pork producers, and well, it's a very important issue. Do you hear me? I hope so. I lost a little bit of the sound.
You're good. You are good.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's well, very nice. So I don't want to explain too much in details the other methods, but we are not it's not well, a great discovery, but I think the social aspect we have to, all of the community, scientific community, has to develop in this way now. Because there is a lot of method, you know, in macro sector, in political sector. So when we arrive at the farm, and especially social evaluation of the sustainability of the farm, there is some, well, there is a place for some development. So our main objective was to develop a triple bottom line farm-based sustainability assessment tool for dairy farms, especially for dairy farms in Quebec. Triple bottom line include environmental, economic, and social. And the methodology is, I think, one of the main aspects of the method, because it's what we name in scientific literature, a social construction. It's built with scientific advisor and farmers. And I will explain this aspect because it's very important. The methodology is a social construction approach in 5 steps. First, define the concept of dairy farming sustainability at the farm level based on the farm sustainability definition, as we've seen before. We have to identify goals and principles to achieve by the assessment, select components for each aspect of sustainability, select indicators for each component, and it established threshold values to compare indicator results. Valerie tried to illustrate in this schema all of the cognitive process and the steps that we made for elaborate the methodology. It's not a top-down method. We have to go and step forward, and you know, I will not insist on this aspect, but I think this figure illustrates all of the well, the scientific method that we use in this kind of map. So as you've seen, it's not a linear process, and it's a participatory process, which is very important. First, for the selection and identification of indicators, we have 2 methods, participatory method. The Delphi method, I don't know if you know Delphi method, I will take just a brief definition, and a focus group. Who was the participants? We name it experts. It's the same part of researchers, stakeholders, for example, advisors, environmental advisors, or some advisors are very dedicated to the economic and management aspect, and of course farmers, which were part of the group. The Delphi method. Delphi does not require a face-to-face meeting of experts, and we use a wide range of experts while limiting travel costs. And also Delphi is very interesting because it's confidentiality of the process. Confidentiality, assure confidentiality of the process. I have to tell some words about Delphi. The Delphi technique was used first to identify the needed elements for the construction of the indicators for the 3 aspects of sustainability. First, Delphi method, we send a form by mail or fax, but mainly by mail, a form containing a question, a very large question. How do you evaluate the environmental sustainability of a farm? Or what is for you an environmental sustainability farm? What is for you the indicator? and at large. Though we send a form containing a question regarding the subject, and the form was initially sending to, for example, environmental aspect, 29 experts. For economic aspect, 19 other experts, and for social aspect, 32 other experts. And in our case, the respondents were asked to list elements to be considered when assessing the sustainability of dairy farms. Potential indicators were compiled and submitted to the same 25 experts, who now, for the second time, we ask them to rate the indicators for their relevance and easiness on farm acquisition. Thus, the participants, or experts as we name it, have the opportunity to make their point of view evolve, to see as quite same as some other people use different words but sometimes same meaning. So the participants have the opportunity to make their point of view evolve, and the main features of the Delphi technique are, as I said, confidentiality, anonymity, which aims to reduce, the influence of super experts. For example, advisors of farmers feel more comfortable to give their information if they are not first with the the researchers and some. Well, it was very interesting for this aspect. The downside of this method is that it does not take into account the evolution of point of view that often arise in a group. So the first Delphi gave us, for example, at the right of your screen, you see social aspect. We have 32 experts. We send a form. They give us a lot of statements, 166. And when we made some classification and regroupment, and we send another, we ask them to classify, prioritize them. And the second Delphi response, we have now 30 indicators, and 18 people were response to the second request. And finally, we regroup 11 people on the focus group for the social aspect, 12 for the environmental aspect, 10 for the economic aspect, and 11 experts for the social aspect. And we made a focus group that followed the Delphi. And while the focus group members were selected among the participants of the previous Delphi technique, and during the focus group, thresholds values were determined for each selected indicator, and the indicators were also grouped by component, and their weighting discussed by the group members. So the methodology is very important. That's why it's based on inductive logic. We induce knowledge on the field, and it's a social construction based on the knowledge of the three main, in French we say stakeholders. I'm not sure of in English we have the same meaning, but researchers, advisors or consultants, and farmers. Same numbers. Well, I follow you. Well, this is for the people who don't know Canada, this is Canada first, and Quebec, and the region of Quebec, which we test the quality of the indicators after the focus group on 40 farms. I will explain that next. 40 farms selected in two contrasted agroclimatic regions. Mm. Yep. Yes, on the map at the bottom left, the red dots represent, for example, the first region, which was Montérégie region, near from you, from Montreal too, and it's a flood region. So the Montérégie region at the bottom, sorry, and the other one was in the east part of the Quebec, the Bas-Saint-Laurent region. And we made interviews on the farm and a mailing survey for the social aspect, for collecting the data and validate the indicators. The objective was not to have representative data, it was to verify, to validate the quality of the indicators. Some indicators looks good and interesting, but you know, remember the 6 quality of a good indicator? There is some aspect, for example, the information of the farm is difficult to find, or, well, other elements. We have to question indicators and sometimes to let it mettre de côté, set aside. No, I'm not sure. We have to test the quality and abandon some of them. Some data about dairy farms. Why do we choose dairy farm? Because it's the most important agriculture sector in Quebec. 33% of all farms in Quebec, the 2 regions, very contrasted regions. And we made some interviews on the farm and mailing survey. Valérie was very involved in this aspect. It was a social sustainability was a large part of his doctoral thesis. And we will see how can we measure social indicators as quality of life, for example. We will see. We use a questionnaire, Likert scales, and we try to measure perception and satisfaction. Like I said before, I will not insist on environmental and technical economic aspect, but I will show you. It's important to realize that the method had the 3 aspects. And for example, environmental indicators, we have 13 indicators were determined for environmental aspect and group within 4 components: cropping practices, fertilization management, farmland management, and soil quality. And each component had a weight, which were determined in focus group. For example, cropping practices, which 30% of the total of environmental aspect. Fertilization 30, farmland management 20, soil quality 20. And for those who want to read the indicators one by one, they are all listed in the conference text that Deborah talked about. We've made a presentation in Vienna, summer 2010. Well, some indicators are quantitative and others are simply yes or no question. For example, the indicator crop rotations in the cropping practices component will be calculated with the proportion of field area, while the indicator on-farm woodlot in the farmland management component will be a simply yes or no question. In the technical economic aspect, we have 8 indicators. A master student Donald La Rochelle realized the study with the same methodology and developed 8 indicators in 5 components, which are technical management, economic viability, expenses control, labor efficiency, and self-sufficiency. this last component is quite specific to the a sustainable farm in Quebec, the forage self-sufficiency, because the other one may be applied to a conventional farm. There is not necessarily great differences in the technical economic aspect, but the forage self-sufficiency is important in the sustainability of a dairy farm. And, well, the aspect that you are interested may be the social aspect. We have we determined four components of the social aspect. I think in the literature, even now, it's the most maybe innovative aspect. 20 indicators have been selected and grouped in 4 components, which are farm succession, quality of life, entrepreneurship, and social integration. I will tell you that, you know, for example, we have debate inside the research team, and for me, I'm not so sure of the concept of entrepreneurship, and I will try to promote governance, but it doesn't, in a democratic system, you know, it doesn't pass. So, well, I will explain all of these components and all of the indicators in each component. We identify 20 social indicators. Many indicators are measured with Likert scale question, who give us the farmer's perception on the topic. For example, we ask farmer if he is very satisfied, satisfied, dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied with its social life, or either its global income for the satisfaction indicator in the components quality of life. For example, well, quality of life, it's 25% of the total of the social sustainability. The indicators are work and workloads, 2 points, holidays, 2 points, satisfaction, 2, social support, 2, health and stress, 5 points, social and professional relationship. For the social integration components, which has 15% of the total of the social sustainability, we identify as a group contribution in local services. Do you, for example, do you have some health services not too far from your farm? I send to Deborah an example of the questionnaire, which include a concrete question that the farmer has to fill and respond. So if I return to social integration, we have contribution in local services, agricultural neighborhood, which is very important for the network of the farmers, and quality of non-agricultural relationship, which is very important in more and more, you know. Social contribution. Do the farmer and his family participate to the community services, or and the last one in social integration is regional presence of agriculture. You know, in Quebec we have some district. I name it district, but it's not the real term. They have to determine what is the importance of their economic activity. And some regions said agriculture is no important, you know, and it's very problematic if you think about the sustainability of agriculture. If you are in a region that is agriculture is not quite important for the institution, the political institution or the regional institution. So the regional presence of agriculture and its importance in the regional development plan are is quite important for the sustainability. The third component is farm succession. Do farmers and family has the value, the continuity value? Do are interested in the continuity of the farm? The presence of farm succession, the preparation for retirement, the farm succession integration of the young generation. In the research that I made on failure and success of the transmission of the farm, it's one of the important aspects. Young farmers are, well, they work on the farm, but they don't feel as responsible for some strategic decision, and it's very important for the continuity of the farm. The last component is entrepreneurship, or governance for me, which includes not only the level of education, but the level of competencies. It's 6 points. Other indicator, use of advisory services, 6 points. Vision of the future and the future of the farm and the pessimistic or optimistic aspects. So we try to use some scientific literature in the entrepreneur on literature and try to adapt some questionnaire to simplify, of course, but to try to adapt for evaluate this aspect. One of the other indicators is human resources management, 6 points, and entrepreneurial abilities, 6 points. For example, how do we measure that entrepreneurship aspect? I will give you a concrete example. Well, I have on this. Yeah. The questionnaire has 52 questions, and it's qualitative evaluation by farmers. Maybe some of you knows the Likert scale, agree, rather disagree, or disagree, and we gave some point for each aspect. Or sometimes if we ask about quality of life on the farm, you have to put an answer like very satisfied, rather unsatisfied, or very unsatisfied, and we gave some points for each response. Example of calculation of indicator satisfaction. We have 3 questions, like, how much do you enjoy your regular farm activities? A lot, enough, a little, not at all. What is your level of satisfaction with your life on the farm? Very satisfied, rather unsatisfied, or very unsatisfied. And another one, how do you rank your overall net household income? You know, the perception of household income is quite more important than the objective household income. And that's why in the literature, there are some aspects that we have to take account, and we put this question because it's very important. Some people are able to support a lot of debt, but others not. And that's why we ask, for example, this question about net household income, very satisfied, rather satisfied, etc., etc. And the maximum score was 7, for example, for this indicator. I summarize the evaluation, but there is, I think, a quite meaningful example of how do we evaluate the social aspect. And after all, Valérie, for example, present that maybe you know this kind of diagram. It's a spider web diagram or something like that. Yeah. We give to the farmer an indication of his score. For example, here are an example of the social results. It is a radar diagram of the farm with the higher score in the Montérégie region compared with the average of the region. It's a farm that's represented here. The full red line is the result of the farm, and the dashed green line is the average of the region, Monterrey regions. I score of sustainability is shown by a big area of the radar, and we see even if a farm has a high score, it could have some weak points. For example, in this case, the farmer has no vision for his farm and has too much work on the farm with a score 0 for this indicator. But you know, this farmer said, I remember, he liked to work a lot, and he is young. That maybe there is some really meaningful reason that's why it is. But, well, for example, a young farmer at 35 years old, maybe the vision of the future of the farm is not quite clear as a most older farmer. So, well, surprisingly, this farmer has a good satisfaction, even if there is too much work on the farm. But it's adapted to his situation. And yeah, that is an example of the information given to the farmer, like to be compared with the situation of others. So, finally, I don't know. Yeah. Hi, this is the conclusion. My God. I hope you will understand my silly English, but yeah, I have to tell you about the conclusion and the ongoing future of the work. Yeah, one of the innovative aspects of this tool is that it contains indicators, as you've seen, for measuring the social sustainability of dairy farm, and yeah, it's a self-assessment tool for dairy farmers. It can hide the reality, but you know, it's his problem. We don't try to measure and to make some policies with the result. It's a tool, a self-assessment tool for dairy farmers and for their advisors. If they not fill correctly the questionnaire about the social aspect, well, I have to say, yeah, it is his main problem is for the farmers and their family, and that's why it's a self-assessment tool and diagnosis tool for advisors too, and also for students who try to concretize the aspect of sustainability, and mainly social sustainability. We try to build this method because we want to approach to improve sustainability on each farm and adapt the situation on each farm. And I think it's a possible path for the integration of sustainable development in agriculture. And for us, it was a very successful multidisciplinary research project. As I said, it's one, as I am concerned, as a researcher, it's one of the most profitable research projects because 3 students were involved. And the future is, finally, we will try to adapt. Oh, I have to present the team, but I have to say that the diffusion and the adaptation of the method was presented to the Dairy Farmers Association, and we will be very interested if the organization of farmers will appropriate the method and diffuse will be responsible for the diffusion. because if farmers take the responsibility of this, it will be validated by the field. You know, I'm not sure that I will be clear, but well, I have to just quickly, but it's very important to present the team of this project. There is, of course, me, but my colleague Doris Pellerin. Doris is a specialist on technical and economical aspect of dairy farms. Guy Allard, which on the forage aspect, and for the soil and environmental soil aspect. Annie Brégard was the professional. The PhD student, Valérie, which is on the board, I think. The master student, Donald La Rochelle, and the founders, le Fonds québécois de recherche sur la nature et la technologie, and No Valais, the Canadian Dairy Commission.